CORS stands for Cross-Origin Resource Sharing. CORS itself is an HTTP feature that restricts what resources a web application can access across domains. A resource can be anything from a web page, image, video, style sheet, or script. Anything you could potentially request through your browser is a resource. But what does the cross-origin in CORS refer to? Well, an origin is essentially the first part of a URL. The scheme, like the HTTP or HTTPS part, the domain part, and the port. When browsers see a request originating from one origin to another, they evaluate some rules for whether or not to disallow or allow the request. Contrary to what you might think, not all cross-origin requests are blocked by browsers. These kinds of requests are referred to as simple requests. Examples include embedding an image from another site, embedding a script, linking to CSS from another site, and submitting form data. This should sound familiar. If you work in web applications regularly, you probably haven't run into many restrictions embedding JavaScript from a CDN or linking to images across domains. The browser inspects a request to determine whether or not it should be restricted. This is where CORS comes into play. Once a browser determines a request needs to be restricted, it can use CORS to determine whether or not to allow or disallow the request. How does a browser make that determination? Here's an example of a so-called simple request. The website contoso.com requests an image from visitcontoso.com. Since the request is an embedded image, even though it's a cross-origin request, the browser will not enable CORS by default, because embedding images is a simple request, so the image will be embedded without issues. In the browser, I have this demo page set up to request an image from our demo Azure Storage account that has CORS enabled. This represents our example visitcontoso.com. If we open up the DevTools, let's close the console, and let's inspect the image, you can see here it's just a simple embed. If we look at the network traffic as I reload the page, we can see a single request goes out, and if we take a look at it, there's no CORS headers being sent, and the request succeeds. Now you might wonder, can the server visitcontoso.com enable CORS restrictions and disallow this request? Surprisingly, the answer is no. Since the browser has classified this as a simple request, it will not send an origin header, which is required for all CORS requests. The server could return a CORS rule in the response headers, such as access control allow origin, which enforces an origin match by the browser. But in this case, the browser is not treating this as a CORS request, so it will ignore any CORS headers in the response. If we hop into our storage account in the Azure portal, you can see I've actually already enabled CORS on our demo account. Let's take another look at the response headers from Azure on the embedded image. If you'll notice, there are no CORS-related headers on the response. This is because the way Azure responds to requests. Since the browser didn't initiate a CORS request, Azure will not return any CORS-related headers in the response. Even if it did for some reason, the browser wouldn't do anything differently. The easiest way to think about this is that the browser is the one initiating a CORS request, and the origin header must be sent in all CORS-related requests. Therefore, you will also see most servers that support CORS only return CORS-related headers when they see the origin header present on a request. This is certainly the case with Azure Storage, as we'll see later. There are several headers you may encounter when working with CORS, including the origin and access control allow origin header, but there are others. There's the request method and allow methods, which can specify what method the request will be and respond with the specific HTTP methods to allow. There's the same mechanism for headers with request headers and allow headers, which can restrict what headers the browser will send. The allow credentials header specifies whether credentials are allowed on the request. If this is missing or false, the browser will cancel a CORS request that attempts to send credentials, as we'll see in a bit. Finally, there's access control max age, which informs the browser how long to wait to expire the CORS policy on that request. This is really useful for increasing performance.